Greetings, everyone, and welcome to Whiskey Uncorked. My name is Brian, and we will be reviewing another Scotch whiskey today. This time, we're going to the Western Highlands. We're going back to Diageo and their official bottling line. This is off the backs of Clynelish 14 a few months ago now, I believe. We talked about batch variation a lot in that video. Go check that one out if you want a little bit of context, but yeah, we're going to the Western Highlands today, and we're going to be talking about another distillery that I think a lot of people out there wish there was more of for us to try, some more varieties, maybe from some sources outside of Diageo. But we will be discussing and reviewing the Oban 14-year-old. So yes, a couple months ago, we did review the Clynelish 14, and it was a bottle that I think a lot of people, or a lot of what I had been hearing prior to me picking that bottle up, was that Clynelish, and particularly the 14-year-old expression directly from Diageo, was experiencing a lot of batch variation. And it appears that I got, at least in my opinion, it felt like I had gotten one of those bottles from a batch that just didn't really live up to not only the distillery's reputation, but just that release's reputation as well. Because the Clynelish 14 is definitely a bottle that I think a lot of us have felt over the years, that it's kind of Diageo's like bone that they're throwing us a little bit, like, hey, we have this legendary distillery that creates amazing whiskey that we know you all love. So we're going to throw you a bone, as I said, and we're going to give you something at 46% and is generally pretty representative of that distillery's profile. Now, the bottle that I got wasn't horrible. It was, I gave it a 4 out of 10, below average. It didn't really quite have that waxy quality. It definitely just had a bit of a flat kind of Diet Coca-Cola. I don't know if it was from the coloring or what it was, but it just had a flavor that was off. There was some bitter wood or something on the back. Again, could that have been like excessive use of coloring? I don't know. It's what I imagined that E150A tastes like, so that's kind of why I went with that. But anyways, I've heard that, maybe they've gotten over that a little bit. I don't know, who's to say. It's kind of a little bit of a crapshoot. It seems like most people are still getting bottles that they find to be good, and that bottle is now gone. I might have raised that up to a 5 out of 10 if I had waited till the very end. Kind of felt like maybe it was a little bit better, but I do also kind of feel like I was, frankly, kind of reaching a little bit. So alongside that Clynelish 14-year-old, we have the Oban 14-year-old. These are kind of the two releases from Diageo that always seem to be kind of right there, side by side with each other. Although the Clynelish 14, I think, does tend to get a little bit more widespread acclaim or respect, at least, where the Oban 14 is a little bit more divisive. There's some people out there that absolutely adore Oban and everything that they do, and then there's some people that have tried probably this expression, at least, and just it didn't click with them. Western Highlands can be a little challenging, I think, particularly if you're not really looking for something unique and a little bit more elemental and mineralic and just maybe a little rougher around the edges, because that does tend to be, not all the time, but the Western Highlands does tend to get known for those things. And frankly, Ardnamurchan is getting praise for that exact thing. So it's a little interesting that maybe Oban, obviously there's reasons why, but that Oban could kind of be right there alongside these distilleries like Ardnamurchan that are making this kind of Western Highland style with a lot of mineralic and sea spray and all the just kind of outdoorsy rocky cliff type notes that you're going to get, because this whiskey has them sans the use of peat. Now, there are a few other expressions of Oban directly from Diageo that you can pick up. I think there's the Little Bay option. Was only a few dollars cheaper than the $14 one here, or sorry, the 14-year one here, just a few dollars cheaper. You get the Distiller's Edition, which looked like there was one available at Total Wine. That's about $150 plus. Probably a no-go there for me. Um, maybe I would certainly love to try it and just see. And then there's also the 18-year-old edition, which I'll have to check the price on that one. I forgot to look, but that one does, I think, tend to be more up into the $150 to $200 range. Yeah, just checked, and it's out of stock, but it's listed at that Total Wine for $160 plus tax. This one is coming in at, I think, $65 plus tax. So, which is actually noticeably cheaper than I think it used to be. Now, a few years back, I remember, at least where I lived at the time, this was $90, $100 a bottle, and made it really kind of difficult to pick up. But it's either come down or evened out, even in that same place back home in kind of the Chicago area. It's much cheaper, $65, $75 a bottle. So it's at least falling in line with its competition. Now, this does come in at 43%. It is chill filtered to no end, and it has a pretty, at least in my personal opinion, this has a sizable amount of E158 coloring just based on the flavors that you're getting. Not that tasting the coloring necessarily, but it's dark enough where at 14 years old, you would expect this to probably contain at least some sherry, and I don't pick up really anything resembling sherry. So we'll get into that a little bit more in the tasting notes and whatnot, but this bottle is really just kind of this strange anomaly. You don't know who it's for because the flavors are interesting. They're complex. This isn't going to be I don't consider this to be like a beginner's whiskey, even though my definition of a beginner whiskey is probably broader than a lot of what a lot of other people would consider, because I don't think you need to give people super simple, light examples of Scotch whiskey when that's not the thing that's going to make them want to drink more Scotch whiskey. But anyway, that's another video. But yeah, so you get some kind of raw, elemental, mineralic, almost kind of seaside salty, maybe a little bit of brine, just kind of rough around the edges, which is fine. There's nothing necessarily wrong with that. And I can even appreciate those styles of whiskey, to be sure. But yet you come out at 43%, you color it. So I'm not really sure who's like buying and drinking this stuff on a regular basis, but the United States is one, apparently, according to the newest edition of the Malt Whiskey Yearbook, which go check out maltwhiskeyyearbook.com, or at least Google that. You'll be able to find it. The 2025 edition is out. I've got mine, and invaluable resource. So if you forgot about yours this year, head on over and track down a copy for yourself. But yes, this is the U.S. is apparently one of the larger purchasers and consumers of Oban single malt whiskey in the world. So again, not really sure who's out there loving and drinking this style of whiskey, not really talking about it, but it's apparently really popular here. Oban is a small distillery. It's less than 1 million liters per year, and this is after like a small expansion. They can't really expand the distillery because of their location. It's like in the middle of town, and there's a cliff right next to them that like they can't make it bigger without like tearing down parts of the town. So we're not really going to be getting any more of this. Again, which is really unfortunate because it seems like Diageo is making use of every drop because none of it is really getting out into the independent bottling market. So let's start talking about tasting notes here. I think we covered just about everything else. It is my sneaking suspicion that this is either entirely bourbon cask or refill cask, maybe a little bit of both. I really don't think there's much, if any, sherry influence outside of maybe some tired old refill casks, which I think is kind of part of the problem just in general, right? This is both the Clynelish and the Oban, and probably a whole heck of a lot of other distilleries in Diageo's portfolio. Their primary reason for existing is to produce whiskey that's going into blends, like Johnny Walker, essentially. And when you have a line of whiskeys that is thought to be like a step above the bottom shelf, right? The Johnny Walker, at least in the States, you got your bottom shelf, like stuff that you expect to be swill. It's going to taste bad, right? Names that you've never heard of. Pretty sure these companies just change the name of the same whiskey all the time because people are only going to buy one bottle of that crap. And that even if it is like $7.99 for a liter and a half, it's not good. So they're just like, I don't know for sure, but I think they just changed the label because I'm like, how do they keep selling this stuff? And I just constantly see like new names of, blended Scotch whiskey that I've never heard of. Anyways, Johnny Walker is supposed to be a step above that. It's consistent. It's not going to taste bad. It might not be exciting or interesting, at least not to us, but it is generally going to be associated with quality amongst most regular day people. But they can't charge any more for it than they really already are. They're having the same problem with like Guinness and stuff like that. They've run into this issue where their market research says that nobody's going to pay any more money than they already are for these products, but the cost to make them keeps going up. And so they have to look for ways to keep the cost down because no one will pay more than the current price already is. So there's a lot of kind of criticisms of Diageo for making bad whiskey, and I think that's entirely deserved. It's infuriating at times. But being a company that's publicly traded, they need to keep sales and volumes and profits and all those things up. And yes, some of it is cynicism, some of it is overcharging, some of it's just really bad business. But I think a lot of it with their actual whiskey that they make, since they're making the whiskey to possibly go into blends or likely to go into blends, the stuff that ends up in the single malt bottles is probably in the same casks. Maybe they may not be setting aside those casks specifically for the single malt bottlings, and we're getting tired old casks because those are the cheap casks, and that's what's going to help them keep the price of Johnny Walker down so that your everyday drinker can still afford it and is willing to pay for it. So if I'm ever going to defend Diageo, that's probably it. So take that for what you will. But there are economics and things involved here. And unfortunately, we get these bottles, which are, the 43% doesn't bother me all that much because the 3% difference, if this was 46, would be largely imperceptible. And this is a flavorful whiskey. So I don't have any issue with that. It's obviously the filtration and the coloring and then almost completely misrepresenting the style of whiskey that it would be. Because now this comes in a tube, but if I saw this bottle just sitting on the shelf, I would assume some sweeter, fruitier sherry notes. And that's not what you're going to get. And as I said, it is a flavorful whiskey, but it doesn't make a lot of sense. And some of those flavors just frankly aren't very good. All right, but enough of that. Let's get to the tasting notes. Let's see how it's smelling and tasting today, and we'll give this a score. Here we go. There's a couple things going on. This is a fairly unmistakable whiskey to me now. I don't know if I could pick it out of a blind. But let's focus on some of the positives. Generally speaking, the first thing that's going to hit your nose, like I've said before, is more of an elemental, outdoorsy, sit next to the ocean with waves hitting the rocks. It has an elemental, mineralic, somewhat fresh, but damp and mildewy almost. It's this weird combination of just being outside in the elements. And that, I think, is fantastic. It's unique. There are other whiskeys and stuff that you can get that out of. Like I said, like Ardnamurchan is probably the new distillery that's doing that. Some of the other island distilleries and things you can pick up that quality as well. And this is completely unpeated, so you can almost tell what this would smell like with a little bit of peat. This is probably a base of some of those coastal Isla distilleries and whatnot. So you can definitely pick up this kind of quintessential Western Highlands sort of style. However, that's not all you're getting. You are getting a little bit of fruit, but it's kind of a little bit sharp, like maybe a little green banana, maybe a little bit of citrus, some lemon, and a maltiness, right? You're getting like quintessential kind of bourbon cask, lightly influenced spirit by bourbon cask or refill cask. And you can smell that quintessential Diageo note of like a little splash of flat Coke. I don't know if it's just me or if I had that visualization in my mind at one point and that now I can't like unsee that or unsmell it or untaste it. But it's unmistakable. It's just kind of like, again, it's flat Coke. I'll probably say that a couple more times in the video. I try not to, but it's such an obvious smell that you get these things kind of melded together and it just doesn't smell really good. It's just kind of off. There's parts of it that I like. There's parts of it that even kind of get me excited, but everything's disjointed. It feels mushed together. The fruit and the Coke and the sea spray and rocks just don't quite mesh for me. It does have, it's very fragrant, 43%. Like, this is no slouch in the glass. It's full, it's thick, it's got a dampness to it. There's good things in here. It's close. But I think some casks and presumably, especially in the casks, aren't doing a lot of work and you're putting what I think is a ton of coloring in here, it's gonna have an effect. So I don't know. At the end of the day, whatever's causing it, I'm not a huge fan of the nose, and it's more so the bigger disappointment is that it's close to being good. And it's just kind of, for the lack of a better term, pun intended, I guess, falls a little flat. All right, let's see how it's tasting, if it's tasting any better. Spoiler alert, unless today's the day that it pulls itself together. We're gonna be on a little bit of a rough ride here, but let's give it its chance. Cheers. Yeah, same. Tastes just like it smells. The good parts, the bad parts. It's thin on the front of the palate. It doesn't really leave a ton of kind of residue in your mouth. It's got good flavor. It's not a quiet whiskey. It's not a complex whiskey, but it's not simple. It's not super straightforward. Like I said, it has some uniqueness to it. It's bringing something to the table. Oban is definitely not a distillery that's trying to make Glenlivet. They're making something with character. It's just the delivery, the tools, I think, that the whiskey is being given are just not letting it completely shine through. And all the negative qualities that I talked about on the nose, I would say that this one hasn't been as kind of sickly bitter on the back of the palate as the Kleinlich 14 was. I think that one, maybe the extra ABV, maybe less filtration, I don't know. But that one just really kind of felt like it tasted bitter. That's here too, but it's a little bit lighter. But I don't think there's a whole lot to add in terms of notes from the nose, because all of those things are there. But let's do one more sip and see if I can if there's anything worth really articulating. Here we go. At the front of the palate, so empty. I mean, it's malty, it's got some vanilla, it's like you can taste it, but it's not doing anything. You swallow and you get those elemental qualities, you're getting the minerals. It's not really salty. Not really at all. And I would almost appreciate maybe a little bit of a bite at the end there. Give it some life, because the crescendo is pretty quick. It comes up with the maltiness. There is a touch of chocolate today. And it seems more like a sherry chocolate, but again, it's not much. Fruitiness is pretty not there. A little bit of lemon and pears maybe. It's pretty light. Nothing that's gonna like really draw your attention to it at all. It's kind of like malty mineral water with some caramel. Finish is pretty weak. It dissipates pretty quickly. What's left is just that kind of drying bitterness, and it's not as bad as, like I said, I think it was worse on the Kleinlich, but yeah, there's just nothing really to look forward to here. It doesn't taste terrible. It's close. Like, this is gonna end up, as soon as this review is over, now that I finished that bottle of Kleinlich, this is gonna take its place like on my bottle kill shelf, where I put the bottles that I want to not forget about, and then it's just time to finish them. I'm done with them, or I've had them open for a long time. This is going right up there. It's not even going to make it back to its spot on the shelf, because this is something that, yeah, it's perfectly fine warm-up whiskey. There are some negatives outright to it, but generally speaking, I don't find it to be outright offensive, which I do think the Kleinlich was kind of getting close, although it did improve. Like I said, by the time I was done with the bottle, I might have bumped that up to a 5. Maybe not. I don't know. Not really important at this point, but yeah, I mean, I have a feeling that if you put some Oban in a good cask and you let it sit there for quite a while and you bottled it, and without stripping it of everything that probably fills out its character, that this is probably a distillery that can make some really wonderful stuff. I've been tempted to pick up the 10-year-old special releases that come out pretty much every year now. They're on the lower end of prices for that line. I think $120, $130 for the Oban 10-year-old. It's 10-year-old cask strength whiskey. I know it's a smaller distillery. There's not a ton of it out there, I guess. Although, like I said, well, there's like 4 different... I don't think I really realized that there were like 4 different expressions of this. I did until like I actually went to like Total Wine's website and was like, oh wow, yeah, they have like 4 or 5 different bottles of Oban. So that would probably be the only other Oban I'd be willing to buy. I don't think I'm going to try to spend $160 on 43% 18-year-old whiskey. The Distiller's Editions and the Little Bay, I'm not going to mess with those. Especially like the Little Bay is only like $4 less than the 14-year-old. Maybe someday just to try a different expression, but I certainly don't have high hopes for it. It'd be a bottle I'd be buying expecting to not like it, so I don't like doing that, and the only times I do it are for the channel. Now, the one thing I wanted to do was take advantage of this. I have a bottle of Oban 14 that was purchased back in 2020. So I remember not hating this bottle. I don't think I loved it. It was gifted to me by my brother Kevin, because he absolutely hated it. So, well, that was very early on in his and my journey, but especially his. So I don't know what he would think of it today. I just wanted to do a quick side-by-side. I haven't tried this before. I just wanted to see if there is some batch variation or change in the last 4 years to keep track of which one's which. Probably should have poured this out and let it open up a little bit. The nose seems a little bit quieter. Yeah, let's just go into the palate. Don't want to take too much time for this anyways. I was just curious. Figure pouring myself a sip or two would be a fun little experiment. So here we go. Cheers. I'll go back and take another sip of this, but much less of that flat Coca-Cola flavor. Much more maltiness. Maybe even a touch of that salty, but like that saltiness I was looking for. Finish seems to last a little longer. It's still fairly thin on the palate. But yeah, it doesn't taste like Diet Coke. And the finish is a little more full and actually tastes like whiskey. A lot of similarities. The differences are on the back half. It's fuller. There's no that artificial kind of just acrid bitterness. Yeah, it lasts longer. This one fell off already by this point, and it's got a touch of saltiness. Yeah, better casks for sure, undoubtedly, and possibly let's see, color-wise, a little hard to tell. It looks there's more whiskey in this one, so it might be throwing it off. The old version looks slightly lighter, but that could just be the amount in the glass. Man, I can still taste this one. Yeah, this version, this bottle from 2020 is significantly better. I mean, it's not a 9 out of 10 or anything, but it's actually enjoyable to drink. Let's go back to the old one real quick. Or the new one, sorry. This is the new one. Nothing. Bitter. Oh man. I would buy another one of these. I would buy another bottle of this. You know, not a shelf staple. But off the back of that, the middle of the palate on this was like, I couldn't taste anything. And then it turned into the bitter. Yeah. Like, it's not this massive difference. I'm not drinking two different whiskeys. You can see the similarities. But the older version just doesn't taste fake. It tastes like whiskey. And this just kind of takes you on a weird journey of flavors that don't make any sense. This has like the same flavors in it with the dials tuned ever so slightly, but it just has a better back finish, back half, and that's what you taste most in a glass of whiskey, right? Or the longest, at least hopefully. So yeah, very, very interesting. I will keep a sample of this one. I only poured a little pour out of here. So maybe in 5 more years, they'll be back with another bottle of Oban, because I don't think I'm going to be buying another one of these, the 14-year-olds, anytime soon. Don't see much of a reason to. But score-wise on this, I gave the Kleinlich a 4 out of 10. This isn't much better, if at all. This is probably right where that whiskey was when I reviewed it. So this is not a bottle I'm going to be looking to be buying anytime soon. Maybe in a few years when I've run out of, if I've run out of things to do, I'll circle back again to this, to the Oban 14, or unless the community starts telling me that it's something that I need to try. But I'm going to stick with a 4 out of 10 on this one. This one's below average. This is a whiskey that has flavors that I actively don't particularly like, and I don't necessarily think that it's just my preference on that. Now, you may be an absolute lover of Oban 14, and I'm not going to argue with you. I'm not going to tell you you're wrong, but this is probably not a bottle. Kleinlich 14, I'll buy another one of those just out of stubbornness, and it's Kleinlich. The Oban, my next purchase, if I buy one, will probably be a special release or something. Oh, it's been a long time since I bought a bottle out of that line of whiskeys, because there's just better things to spend your money on usually. But if they don't do some really weird cask finish or something like that, maybe I'll grab one. I don't know. I haven't really even paid attention to this year's because I just didn't really plan on picking any of them up. Anyways, value-wise, if you love Oban, then I don't think you're going to have any problem paying the $65. For me, this could be $50. I probably still wouldn't buy it. So yeah, I mean, value subjective. I'll say that given this 14-year-old age statement, $65 is pretty fair here in the US. There's a lot of 10 and 12-year-olds at higher ABV that are in the $70 range, $80, maybe even a little bit more. So going by specs and all that, it's probably fair to good value. But yeah, you've got to know that you like it. If you haven't tried it yet and you're thinking about buying a bottle, try it in a bar, see if it's your style, and go from there. But with that, thank you everyone for watching. I really do appreciate you guys swinging by every week. And if you're new here, please hit the sub button below. Leave a comment. Let me know what you think of Oban. I know there's be a lot of nasty comments towards Diageo, but we know what we're getting. Unfortunately, they have a lot of really great distilleries under their banner, and we don't get a lot of really good whiskey from them, unfortunately. Although it's being made, we know it is because we can look at the independent bottling scene. Unfortunately, with Oban, that's not possible. But yeah, like, comment, subscribe, all that fun stuff. I really do appreciate you all being here. Until next week, another whiskey review.